Tonight, checking out the budget when it comes to Detroit Public Schools. The number the governor threw out this week wasn't new, about $720 million over 10 years, but where he'll get the cash from is new. He plans to tap the state's tobacco settlement fund to pay DPS debt. Is this a good idea to take the money from
we always, that's like some cash cow
it's
that we
always... It's a never-ending fund.
It's the magic lamp.
Tobacco, right? I mean, again, another opportunity to start a discussion about financing and what money we need to have the government that we want and how we're going to get it. And he doesn't do it. He says, well, this stash of money over here, this magic stash of money, I'll just go back to the well.
But
All
don't you
these
have to
conversations.
Say that you can't stop and have conversations. You've got to at least have some action and say, we're going to take it here, and
all
then
these
have the larger
conversations.
conversation.
The more you talk, the poorer we get,
Okay,
Steve.
so so let's put out a budget. Let's put out a budget that includes talking about a service tax. Let's put out a budget that says let's start a campaign to change the way that we collect income tax in this state from flat to progressive. Let's talk about the way that that business taxes are structured in the state. I mean, the budget document is the place to start. Actually, not just having the conversation, but talking about policy.
Can you really have that conversation, though, again, in an election year, too?
But this is a governor who's been afraid of the legislature since he got elected.
You better be afraid of the people you start all of those taxes. It's not going to fly here.
Do we want
the $72 million for Detroit schools is the start of a pay down of that debt. If you could erase that $720 million in debt, the governor's office claims it frees up about $1,000 per student for the classrooms. That's a big deal because right now you look at the per pupil funding in Detroit and you see a big number, but a large chunk of that is going to service. No, it's going to service the debt. If you could, and sure, special ed, but it also goes to service the debt. If you could take that debt service money and put it back in the classroom, that's going to help those schools. That's going to get it's $1,000 a kid.
Yeah.
That's a big number, and this has got to be done. You can't let that debt just sit there and continue.
But here again,
to grow.
the bigger issue is you have a district that's still dying in terms of population, where so much of the money that goes per pupil goes to things like special ed. The district is upside down the way it's financed, and there are other districts like that. There again, opportunity to start saying, why don't we do it differently? This governor has a jelly spine again, coming out and saying, well, let's fix this immediate problem right here and ignore everything else.
Operationally, you eliminate that debt, and the district starts with a balanced budget.
I want to know who's calling. I want to know who's calling Nolan right now on the show.
It's the governor.
It's the governor. He's calling to give you a little bit of.
Paul W. Smith.
There you go. All right, hey, before
we turn it off.
I want you to be on the radio.
You know, we're going to take the phone away from you because if you can't learn to turn it off, then you shouldn't have one at all. No, we're moving on. I'm cutting you off. I'm cutting you off because other notable.
I'll just tell it to Paul.
Stop talking. The other notable things in the budget: funding for higher ed restored back to the level it was when the governor took office 5 years ago. K through 12 is also growing as well to pay down some of the legacy costs there as well.
Yeah, let's go back to where we were 10 years behind.
Hang on, this has got to be good news. I'm talking about higher ed funding first for a lot of the business leaders who have been pushing for this, and universities, and also keeping the tuition cap is also about 4.5%.
Yeah, it's good. We need to invest in higher education. That is a priority of the business community. Business leaders of Michigan put out their next phase of their Turnaround Michigan plan this week, and it talked about higher investment in our universities, higher investment in the research the universities are doing in terms of mobility and autonomous cars, the M-City, and the exciting project that's going on at Willow Run now to turn that into a center for autonomous driving study and bring the University of Michigan in there too. That's pretty cool stuff. Talk
to me about K through 12. You're still not pleased with the bump up in that?
It's not that I'm not pleased with any of this. I think it does represent, a step back toward some rational financing of the things that we need. They're just small steps. That's all. I mean,
another tax, right?
It could have been much bigger.
Tax.
It's just, it's just a different way of thinking of the way that we pay for government. Right now, I think there are so many signs that what we're doing doesn't work, is not taking care of ourselves, is not taking care of our infrastructure, it's not investing in our futures. To say today we want to go back to funding levels of 2010 when we were 10 years behind what everyone else is doing is not particularly ambitious. That's all.
All right, so let me ask you this then, because you talk about that we need to be looking at the bigger picture and we need to have these larger conversations. All right, so when does this happen? How do we do that, or how do we get our legislators to do that, or does this have to be leaders from the government, or like? So let's start this larger conversation.
The answer is I don't know. I don't know. We had a Democratic governor who didn't do this for 8 years. I mean, let's be honest. Jennifer Granholm was also under ambitious in terms of the way she dealt with cities and universities and education. This governor comes in, says, you know, I'm going to straighten out the mess, and then I'm going to invest in people and infrastructure in the state. It's year 6 of him being in office. We're still not seeing his 6th budget doesn't include that kind of thing. There is a culture among voters that resists the idea of more taxes. Some of this stuff, though, is not about more taxes. It's not about higher taxes. If you went to a graduated income tax, 90% of payers would pay less. If you talk about a service tax, again, most people wouldn't feel that, but business would. We got to talk about whose interests matter the most, and how do we structure government to reflect?
Well, I think
All right, last word,
the
Nolan,
governor
on this.
understands that that sort of tax system and that sort of increase of tax burden would just kill growth in this state. And when you look at what he's done in terms of the things you don't necessarily see, the paying down of long-term debt and getting this state to the place where debt's not such a burden anymore and our future is a little secure. That's what he promised to do. That's what he is doing. I think this budget is starting to reflect the prosperity, the returning prosperity to Michigan, and he is starting to put money back in places that were cut over the last 15 years.
All right.
But the pie, he talked about when he was elected, you got to grow the pie, that the pie has got to get bigger, and you got to stop trying to sort of slice it in different ways. The pie for government is not getting bigger.
This is a larger budget than it was last year, and you're still spending a quarter of it on Medicare, $2 billion on corrections.
And you need that.
Right.
Well, you don't need the corrections part, but you do need the Medicare.
But that's a conversation for another day.
Right.